So, you want to try your hand at making some bread. Why not start with some focaccia? Alright, let's jump right in and start making our focaccia. So to start off any bread, we need some yeast. Without yeast, the bread's never going to rise. I like to use dry active yeast, which requires some activation. As per the instructions, I'm mixing together warm water, sugar, and yeast, stirring it together, and letting it rise at room temperature until it grows into this. Now that my yeast is activated, it's time for me to start mixing my dough. I'm going to start with some olive oil and my yeast mixture, and mix in some kosher salt and some bread flour. All of the exact measurements for this recipe will be written in the description below. This initial mix is going to be all about just bringing the dough together. At this point, I'll just use a spatula to keep my hands cleaner because this is the wettest and stickiest part of the process. After a 5-minute rest on the counter, I'm going to wet my hand and just keep working this a little bit to make sure that there's no clumps of flour, all the flour is hydrated, and the dough is cohesive. Once I've done this adequately, I'm going to let it rest for another 5 minutes and start with my slap and fold. The slap and fold is a method for developing gluten, working the dough, and kneading something that's a little bit wetter and stickier than your average dough. I do this by slapping the dough down and flipping it over. Pick it up 90-degree turn, slap the bottom down, and flip the top over. And I'm just going to keep repeating this process until the dough smoothens out. If you're doing this and your bread doesn't seem to be smoothening out correctly, you just might want to let it sit on the counter for about 5 minutes and let the dough relax. Then just pick right back up with your slap and folds, and the bread will be smooth in probably 5 slaps or less. I actually ended up doing this with my dough for this video, and that's how my dough got as smooth as it did. This obviously takes some practice, so don't stress about it too much, but do your best. Once the dough is as smooth as you can get it, go ahead and lightly oil a bowl for the bread to rise in. This will help the dough not stick to the bowl so much and also not dry out at all. Once your dough is oiled, go ahead and cover with a wet towel or whatever you like to cover your bowl with and let it rise until it doubles in size. This should take you about an hour to an hour and a half depending on how active your yeast is and the temperature of your room. Lightly punch down your dough and separate it from the side of the bowl so that you can easily take it out of the bowl. Then pour some olive oil on a parchment-lined baking sheet, spread it around, and then carefully remove the dough from your bowl, doing your best to keep it in the same shape that it is in the bowl with the top on the top. Now it's time to flatten this out and stretch it out to the size of the sheet pan. My methods for this are flattening it out by hand, as well as stretching it out and kind of letting it retract into the corners. Then cover it with even more olive oil and start poking around so that you give it the classic focaccia dimpled look. Something a little strange that we're going to do is we're going to pour a saltwater brine over the top of our dough to give it a little seasoned saltiness, which will be more effective than just finishing the bread with salt when it's done. Cover with an inverted baking sheet and let it rise for another 45 minutes before baking at 450 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. You'll know it's done when your focaccia is golden brown and looks like this. Admire it. Let it cool on the counter for 5 minutes and then take it out of the pan because you don't want the bottom of your focaccia to get soggy. That's a real bummer. Let it sit on a wire rack until you're ready to eat it and let it make your house smell delicious and like bread. When it's time to eat, transfer it over to a cutting board, open it up, and look at how beautiful it looks inside. And now, because you can't wait any longer, cut up the end piece and dip it in some olive oil to reward yourself for all your hard work. And if you get carried away and eat the whole loaf dipped in olive oil, that's totally cool, but here's a couple of ideas if you want to make something else. Let's start with the caprese sandwich. To start, let's cut off a sandwich-sized piece of focaccia and split it in half. Onto the assembly, let's start out with something the Italians might be mad at me for, Duke's mayo. Follow it up with something they'll be a little happier about, some pesto. Next, slice up some fresh tomatoes. I really like a lot of thinly sliced tomatoes, but cut them however thick you like. Layer them on, and don't forget to add some flaky salt and fresh cracked pepper. Next, slice up some fresh mozzarella, line it up, top your tomatoes with some olive oil, add some balsamic vinegar, and bada boom bada bing, you got your caprese sandwich. And if this sandwich doesn't make you just want to yell, "Woo!" I don't know what will, because look at that. I hope you eat this sandwich with pride and enjoy every bite. Mop up all the olive oil and balsamic that's inevitably fallen out of the sandwich, and if you want another one of these, you still have a whole loaf of focaccia. So, treat yourself. Next on the list is a meatball sandwich, which we're gonna actually go open face because, let's face it, I've been eating way too much bread. Assembly on this guy is gonna be super easy. We're just gonna roughly cut our meatballs in half and top it off with as much sauce as you desire. And then on top of that goes some ooey gooey provolone cheese or some low moisture mozzarella if you want. Put that on a baking sheet and throw it in a 400-degree oven for about 5 minutes, or until the cheese starts to caramelize like this. Hit it with some dried oregano and some freshly grated Parmesan cheese, and there you have it, an open-faced meatball sandwich. For a regular meatball sandwich, just put the other half of bread on top. Invite your girlfriend over because, let's face it, I did make one of these halves for her, but instead of standing in front of the camera and eating like animals, we're gonna go sit down like civilized people. Alright, breakfast lovers, let's do some avocado toast. For this, we'll need our focaccia, an avocado, pickled radishes, an egg, and some hot sauce. Go ahead and cut open your focaccia and turn it into the toast part of avocado toast while we cut open the avocado part. Peel it off, throw it in a bowl, add some salt, and start mashing with a fork until it looks like this. Now that your toast is toasted, start painting the avocado. Make sure you're artistic about it. If you want a clean bowl like this, buy a silicone spatula, link below. Top with some pickled radishes for some acidity and a little crunch. Top off with your beautifully over easy egg. Finish with a little salt and pepper. When in doubt, add some Parmesan cheese and a nice drizzle of hot sauce. Break open that egg and watch it run. I didn't film myself eating this mess, but let me assure you, it was delicious. Last thing we're going to make is some garlic bread. Starting out by chopping up some garlic and noticing that my cutting board's moving around a lot, so here's a nice hack. Put a wet towel underneath your cutting board and it won't move anywhere anymore. Chop up your garlic with a knife, with a microplane, with a garlic press, I don't care, just get it fine. Add a stick of butter, put it in a pot, and cook over medium heat until the garlic is super fragrant but not burnt. Put into a heat-proof container to let it cool down, and let it cool on the counter or in the fridge until it's spreadable. Should look something like this. And really, this is just a great thing to have in the fridge at all times. Now to the assembly, split open your focaccia and start a spread. I would generally err on the side of more here. You're never going to be disappointed with more garlic butter. Place in a parchment-lined baking sheet and bake in a 450-degree oven for 10 minutes. Then add a generous amount of Parmesan cheese while you switch the oven to broiler, and optionally add some dried parsley. Leave under the broiler for 1 to 2 minutes until the Parmesan starts browning, but please don't burn it. And please disregard everything I've said in this video that isn't making focaccia or making garlic bread, and just make one giant focaccia into one giant garlic bread, because that is certainly what I'll be doing with my next loaf.